All right, we are live. Welcome to Wealth Redefined. Glad to see everybody today on this Tuesday afternoon. As you know, we go live every Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. So I'll hang out for just a moment here, get the show prepped, let people kind of filter in during the green room before the audio starts, the audio recording starts for the podcast, that is. So today we're going to talk about cybersecurity specifically. This is episode 75, kicking off the month of October, which is themed for cybersecurity, credit report, and money systems. Kind of a security themed month. October is a great time for this. Because the holiday season coming up is kind of one of those more common times for higher activity in terms of hacking and intrusions and identity theft and stuff like that. So that's why I pick October as security month. So I've got a long list of stuff for you today. Here's my show notes today. I'll try and keep it short, snappy, and moving along. But I want to make sure I have all my notes here because I've got a lot to cover today in terms of cybersecurity and kind of walking you through a cybersecurity audit. So it's good to do this annually. Once a year or so is a great time to do it. And like I said, October is a great month because we're kicking off the holiday season. So we're going to get through my list here right about now. So I'll hit the intro music for the podcast and we'll get started. Hey everyone, welcome to Wealth Redefined. I'm your host, Michael Reynolds, independent financial advisor and owner of Elevation Financial. Thanks for joining me today. Glad to have you listening to the show. All right, today we're talking cybersecurity. This month is cybersecurity, credit report, and money systems theme for my business. I really focused on that during the month of October because the holiday season coming up is a time of higher activity for things like hacking, intrusions, identity theft, and just general mayhem in those areas. So I like to focus on those things during this month. So we're going to talk about cybersecurity specifically today. And more specifically, how to secure your life with a personal cybersecurity audit. So I'm going to go through a checklist of things that I like to do every year and remind people to do every year to kind of audit and review your personal security policies and practices and systems that are in place. And I'm going to be honest, most of us are pretty bad at a lot of this stuff. So no one really gets all this stuff right. But the important thing is to start paying attention more closely because ultimately we want to make sure that our money is secure, and going with that, our lives are secure, and that people can't get into our banking and investment accounts and steal our identities and cause all sorts of mayhem and nefariousness when it comes to intrusions and hacks. And so we want to be sure that we do everything we can to promote good security practices and policies in our individual lives. So that's the goal today. I've got a checklist of things. It's pretty long, but I'm going to go pretty quickly through it, hopefully make it snappy and actionable. And I'm also going to put this entire checklist on the show notes as well. I don't always include all the details in the show notes on the podcast, but I am going to put the entire checklist on the show notes here as well. So you at least have the bullet points. I'm going to give a little more commentary with each one and some background and context, but you will at least have the bullet points. So go to elevationfinancial.com, look for episode 75, and you will see the checklist there as well. So let's get started. So what do I like to include in a personal cybersecurity audit on an annual basis? So let's start with passwords. Most people are pretty terrible at passwords. Think about how you manage passwords, and that's probably how most of us manage passwords. A lot of people write them down in books or put them in spreadsheets or put them on Post-it notes, have a big binder full of passwords. They're on paper somewhere, or maybe they're not written down anywhere. You just never know what passwords are for certain sites, and people just don't know how to even log into their stuff. They have to reset them every time. It's a whole big mess. So passwords. First of all, do not write passwords down. If you are storing your passwords in a book or a binder or even a spreadsheet, anywhere that's in plain text, you do not want to store passwords. When it's on paper somewhere, it's very easy for someone who could break into your house or be near that particular spot where the paper is living to grab stuff, and they have passwords to everything in your life. It's all in plain text. It's all easy to find. That's a very exposed way to store your passwords. So we don't want to do that. So eliminate the practice of writing passwords down. That is very insecure. Also, it's easy to lose them all. So if you lose the thing that stores them all, then you're out of luck. You've also your passwords. You got to reset them all, or they're out there somewhere. So anyway, don't write them down. Instead, I'm a huge advocate of using a password manager, something like LastPass, Dashlane, something like that. I personally love LastPass. I think that's one of the better ones out there. There is a free version. There is a $2 a month version, I think, where you can share with family members, and it's well worth it. So everything is stored in one password management system, which is authenticated with two-step verification, thumbprint, face scan, all the biometric stuff. And that is going to store all of your passwords. It encrypts them with high-level encryption, and it also makes it more convenient when it comes to logging into stuff. So one nice thing about a password manager like LastPass is that you only have to remember one password to get in, and the password manager stores everything else for you. So when you're logging into sites, it's also a plugin on your browser or on your phone. So you can click LastPass, log into sites very easily, and you're good to go. So a side effect of this is that it encourages you to create stronger passwords, because if you have to remember all your passwords, you're likely to use passwords that are easily cracked. They're easy to remember, but that also likely means they're easy to guess. And so with something like LastPass, you're relieved of the burden of remembering passwords, which means that you can create longer passwords or more complex passwords. Leslie joining us today. Hey, those that are listening to the audio version, as you probably know, I do this via Facebook Live as well, and people can comment and ask questions. And so Leslie's saying, what's up? So, hey, Leslie, good to see you. Thanks for popping in. As always, if you want to ask questions, if you're watching this live, feel free to pop those in comments. So passwords. I love LastPass. I love password manager apps. It's the best way to manage passwords, in my opinion. And it means you can share them with people. So like if you have family members you want to share passwords with, you can simply share the LastPass item with them, and it'll enter their LastPass account, and they can use it to log in. You can selectively decide if they can see it or not. And so Leslie's popping in saying, so my password shouldn't be one universal password. That's a swear word. Probably not. I mean, you do you, but I think that's going to be a little bit of an issue. So use a password manager. Also, audit and change your passwords at least on a regular basis, minimum annually. That's way too long, but every month or so would be ideal. But at minimum annually. But more importantly, use strong passwords, use long passwords. So a lot of people think that if you use a combination of letters and numbers in your password, then it's secure. It's not. That the length of the password is what makes it more secure. So if you have a password that is, like 123 ABC, and there's some uppercase letters, but it's like 6 characters long, that's not as secure as like 1111111 AAA, and then like a whole bunch of like repeated letters, but it's really long. The reason that longer passwords are more secure is that the length actually makes them harder for machines to crack. So you want to ideally have a random combination of letters and numbers and make passwords really long. I personally use LastPass's auto generation feature. So when I'm setting a password for a new site I'm registering for, I have LastPass create the password for me. And I think I have it defaulted to like 24 characters long, which means it's going to be random. It's going to be super secure. It's going to be long. It's going to be a really, really strong password. So audit and change your passwords on a regular basis and make sure they're not too short and too simple. All right. Also, along with that, with passwords, don't use the same password on multiple sites. Ideally, you should never reuse the same password twice. You should never use the same password more than one time on one site. So that is your goal, is to make sure that none of your passwords are recycled or reused. So don't use the same password on multiple sites. You won't need to if you have LastPass, so that kind of takes care of it. All right, next on my list, let's talk about mobile on phones. You want to lock your phone, make sure it's locked. I think most of us do this with a passcode. Ideally, set it to a 6-character passcode. Most of us use a 4-digit passcode, but you can make it stronger. You can make it a 6-character passcode, which is harder to crack or harder to guess. You also want to make sure that your phone is set to erase the entire device after 10 failed attempts at logging in. That means if someone gets a hold of your phone and they try to guess your passcode after 10 failed attempts, it's going to erase everything, and they're stuck. They're just out of luck. So that's a really good way to make sure that your phone data is not compromised. Along with phones, let's talk about messaging. So by default, most phones have text messages set to stay there forever, basically. So when you have a text message conversation, it's staying there forever by default until you delete it. So what I do is I have my message app set to delete messages after 30 days. And on iPhone, this is in settings and messages. And there's a setting there that says, keep messages for a certain amount of time or forever. I have mine set to 30 days. And if you think about this is a really good practice because how much personal information do we put in text messages? All kinds of stuff. I mean, we text with people close to us, right? It's the most intimate conversations we have. So we might send, personal details about our lives. We might even send, detailed financial information sometimes to spouses or loved ones that need stuff while they're out and about or something. We might be texting stuff that could really open our identities up to theft. And so if those text messages stick around for a long time or forever, that's a whole treasure chest of information that someone could use to compromise your identity or to steal your identity or to get into some of your information. So you want to make sure that your text messages are set to delete after 30 days automatically, and that will help reduce the amount of information that persists in your device. Along with phones and other people using phones also, you want to keep credit cards and debit cards concealed until you're making a purchase. This is more of a physical security thing. If you're at a store and you're pulling out your debit or credit card, it's really easy for someone in line behind you to have their phone out. Looks like they're just texting or something, but they could snap a photo zoomed in to grab your debit card information. So make sure that you keep that information hidden. If you're pulling out a debit card, make sure it's shielded from people around you. Make sure you keep it covered until you're actually using it and putting it in the machine. I personally like using Apple Pay whenever possible, mainly because I'm not pulling my credit card out or my debit card out. I don't have a credit card. I use a debit card. But I'd like keeping it in my wallet. I'm not pulling it out. Also, and the COVID age, which we're in right now during the pandemic, is nice to not have that extra touch point. So I just kind of tap a device and Apple Pay takes care of it. So I'm a big fan of using touchless or rather phone touch devices like Apple Pay or Samsung Pay. Also super convenient. So but anyway, keep those debit and credit cards shielded from those around you. Along the same lines of physical security, be vigilant for skimmers. Make sure that you have a personal policy of when you go to a gas station or a grocery store or someplace where grocery stores not so much, mainly gas stations, but look for signs of tampering. I won't go into it right now, but you can Google ways to notice if it's been tampered with and make sure that you are paying attention to see if there is evidence of tampering on the credit card devices that you're using to make sure it's not using skimming technology to grab the card as an intermediary step. Also, while you're out and about, which we're not so much right now, but in general, if you're using your laptop other places besides your home or your office, use a VPN. VPN stands for personal or virtual private network. And it is a way to encrypt your data so that people can't sniff that data or intercept that data and read it if they're on the same network. This is particularly an issue with things like coffee shops, even co-working spaces, public places where they have Wi-Fi. People can be on the same network and potentially get access to the information that you're sending back and forth over the internet. So a VPN will help encrypt all that data and keep it more secure and private. There's a lot of apps out there. One good one is called Hotspot Shield. I'm not endorsing any particular one. There's a bunch out there, but using a VPN while you're out and about is a really good way to make sure that your data is secured. Also, back to physical security. Shred stuff. Shred anything you can that is sensitive information. Buy a shredder and shred all your sensitive documents after you scan them and store them securely. So I like to have zero physical paper laying around that is sensitive information, tax returns, for example, stuff with my social security number in it, sensitive documents, stuff like that. I want to shred all that stuff and I want to keep it securely stored in a system like Evernote or some sort of secure encrypted system. If you do keep the paper around, keep it limited and keep it in a lockbox that's really, really physically secure. But a lot of us just have paper laying around with all sorts of sensitive information on it, and we don't shred it. We just either throw it away or we don't get around to doing anything with it. So have a shredder, have a weekly system where you put stuff in a pile when it's ready to shred, and then once a week on the weekends, you spend 10 minutes shredding it all, and just make that a habit. That'll keep you ahead of the curve when it comes to physical sensitive information laying around. Next, keep your software up to date, especially your web browsers, your operating systems. A lot of us just ignore those automatic updates, or we don't update software on a regular basis, or we just keep snoozing it. Make sure you keep your software up to date. Now's a really good time to open up your computer, click all the auto update, all the update stuff, and click the button that says check for updates in your browsers and your operating systems and everything you use on a regular basis, and make sure that everything is up to date. That means that you will have all the right patches in place. The software maker will have all the current security measures in place. It'll keep you more secure. So keep all the stuff up to date. Enroll in identity theft protection. Next on my list is ID theft protection. I'm a big fan of it. I like having it just because it's not that expensive, and it's an extra layer of monitoring and insurance as well. So if you do become a victim of ID theft, then most of these services will spend a certain amount of money to recover your identity and kind of help you sort through all the recovering process, and they'll do that for you on your behalf. Also, they monitor things like your email accounts, your social profiles, your credit score, credit activity, applications, things that could be indications that someone is trying to compromise your identity or steal your identity. So I'm a big fan. There's a bunch out there. There's LifeLock, Xander, Identity Guard. There's a bunch of stuff out there. So grab one that appeals to you and get that in place. This is huge. The next thing on my list is, if you do nothing else, do this one thing. It's annoying. It'll drive you crazy, but it's extremely important. You want to activate two-step verification on everything you possibly can. Two-step verification is a system in which, when you log into a site for the first time, or on a certain refresh period, it will prompt you to enter a certain code that gets texted to your phone or gets generated on an app on your phone. So what that means is, if someone, in some other country, for example, gets access to your password and they try to log in, they will not be able to log in unless they have access to your phone as well, or access to that, your text messages that can provide that code to log in. So you want everything you possibly can set up as two-step verification. All of your email accounts, without fail, definitely email accounts, definitely social profiles, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, everything. All banking pretty much forces two-step, so that's probably a given. But if not, make sure you turn that on. Any software program you use, go into your settings, look for two-step verification as an option, and turn that on. Make sure it's turned on absolutely everywhere. I cannot stress this enough. It is one of the easiest things you can do that helps curb your exposure to hacking attempts and people intruding on your accounts and your information. Two-step verification is a must. Get that activated today. Also, on your computer, make sure your screensaver is set to kick in after 15 minutes maximum. 5 or 10 minutes is even better, but maximum 15 minutes. So whenever the screensaver kicks in or goes to sleep, make sure that it's set so that a password is required to log back in to deactivate the screensaver. A lot of us have screensavers that turn on, but when we, move the mouse or open the computer again, it's just logging right back in. Make sure that your screensaver kicks on in about 15 minutes or less. And again, that a password is required. Your computer password is required to get back into your computer after it goes to sleep or after the screensaver kicks on. Also, turn on disk encryption. So most computers now, most operating systems, Mac and Windows both have it. So, turn on disk encryption. So there is an option where you can encrypt the disk on your computer. Turn that on. That adds a layer of protection. So if someone gets access to your computer, pops out the hard drive, tries to get into it, the data is encrypted. And that will go a long way toward preventing someone from getting access to your data. So turn that on. Also, speaking of encryption, next on my list, do not send sensitive information over email. Do not send anything at all, like social security numbers, credit card numbers, anything that is you would consider as sensitive information. Do not send that over email. Email is not secure. Email is not encrypted. Use a service that encrypts information. There's one called sendinc.com, sendinc.com. I believe it's still around. It's a free service. You can use that to send encrypted email. You can use all sorts of other methods, but do not use plain email to send sensitive information. So some of these are more of like audit steps, and some of these are audit steps in the sense that I'm encouraging you to develop a habit around these things. So audit your practices as well. And one of your habits is don't send personal information via email. All right, next, limit your Facebook posts to only be seen by friends. This goes for all social networks in general, but Facebook is the most popular and kind of the most active in this sense. So a lot of people have their posts set to all be public by default. I would advise you to make sure that your posts are only set to friends only by default, so that anyone in the world can't come along and just see your public profile and all your posts and information on it. So make sure everything is only set to friends, and you can selectively turn things on if you want them to be public. But if you're posting pictures of your kids and family and stuff and locations you're traveling, you want that to be private only to friends that you've accepted into your network. And while you're at it, audit your friends list. Make sure that you know everyone there and you trust everyone on your list. Maybe clean some people out that you don't really know or you just kind of accepted randomly. That may be a good practice as well when you're auditing. Also, check your business pages that you're connected to. So if you volunteer with groups or you have business associations, you're probably an admin on some Facebook pages. If you're not active on them anymore, disconnect and remove yourself so you're not tied to external sources that might also be a conduit to getting personal information. Also, while you're at it on Facebook and other social networks, you want to review all the third-party apps that are connected. So in Facebook in particular, you can go to your settings, and there's a setting down there or a section that says something like authorized applications or just apps or something. Click on that, and you'll see a whole list of applications that you've probably authorized over the past few years, and they still have access to your Facebook account. And maybe you're not using them anymore. Maybe they were for some site that you bought something for and you never use again. All sorts of apps could be connected to your Facebook account that could be potential points of entry. So remove everything that is not in use. For most of us, there's probably quite a few apps that you're not going to be using. You can remove a whole bunch of apps, and that gets rid of some of those potential conduits. Next, almost at the end of my list, I promise I'm getting close to the end. Back up your data. This is one of those things where we're usually pretty bad at this, but when you need it, you really need it. So I'm a huge advocate of services like Backblaze or Carbonite or systems like that, where it automatically backs up your data to the cloud on a daily basis and keeps your data securely stored in the cloud, encrypted. So if your computer is compromised or you lose it or something happens, your data is still available to you to restore. So make sure you're using a real backup system that is off-site, ideally, something like Backblaze or Carbonite, where it's stored off-site, encrypted in the cloud. All right. Also, it's a really good time to clear your browsing history. So many of us never clear our browsing history or clear cookies. I say at least once a year, ideally more often, but at least once a year, clear all of your cookies out, all of your browsing history out, everything, and get rid of all that browsing data and start fresh. That gets rid of some old stuff in there that could sometimes be an issue when it comes to being a security risk. It's a good practice to clear that out on a regular basis. Also, be alert for phishing, especially around the holidays. Phishing schemes, spelled PH phishing, are pretty common. You get emails that look like they're from your bank or from PayPal or from something or whatever, and they say, "Hey, your password needs to be reset or something. Click here." Always look for signs of phishing. Here are some of the signs of phishing. First of all, the email has grammatical errors or just sounds like it's not very professional. That's a huge red flag for phishing. Also, if you can hover over a button without clicking on it or a link, so hover over the links but don't click on them. And if the address that pops up looks suspicious, that's a sign of phishing. So, for example, let's look at let's take a major bank like Chase.com. I'll just pick the biggest bank out there. Chase.com is a bank. I'm not endorsing them, but I'm using an example. So if you bank with Chase, the website is going to be chase.com. It's going to end with chase.com. It'll have www in front of it probably, but it'll say chase.com. A phishing attempt would likely have something like chase.secure.com or chase.secure123.com. It'll have the word Chase in it to pretend like it's actually Chase, but it's really not, because the stuff before the .com is not the word Chase. So make sure you're looking at the real domain name, which is the company.com. Look for signs that it looks weird or odd or out of the ordinary. When in doubt, go straight to your bank's website or straight to the website of the provider and log in there, or call them and see if there's see if the email is legit. I'm the habit of just don't trust anything. If I get an email from a bank or something, I don't trust it. It's probably phishing. I'll go log in directly to the site if I need to do something about it, but never click on emails that look sketchy if they're from a financial institution or something like that. Finally, last but not least, there's a bunch more stuff you can do, but I think my list is already too long, so I'm going to stop here. Last but not least, this is one of my kind of a little dig to remind people to do budgeting. because I'm a huge budgeting fan, as people who've heard me kind of soapbox about this know, use a budgeting app. And the reason for this is it forces you or helps you to track your cash flow. And so much of the time, we don't track our cash flow. We don't pay attention to transactions that are happening. We don't look at our bank accounts. We don't look at our money. We just kind of spend and whatever happens. And that means months can go by before we would notice an intrusion. Like someone gets a hold of our credit card and uses it for a fraudulent purchase. We might not notice for a couple of months if we're not paying attention. But if you are monitoring your budget on a regular basis, you're importing transactions, you're categorizing transactions, you're watching where they go in your budget, you're paying really close attention, and you're going to notice when something looks odd within a matter of days. So you're going to notice if someone is using your debit or credit card for a fraudulent purchase somewhere in some other country in the Middle East or something. You're going to be able to see that very clearly if you are paying attention to your cash flow by using a budget. So my favorite budgeting tool, as everyone knows, is YNAB, which is short for You Need a Budget. But I'm not picky. If you're using something, it will help you track your cash flow in a much closer way, and you'll notice when things look sketchy or odd. So that is a great way to pay attention to your money and be on top of potential fraud. All right, long list, but if you do this stuff once a year and either take some action on some of these things and these settings and these practices and implement some of these things as habits once a year, you're going to be way ahead of most people, and you're going to be in a much better position to reduce your exposure to hacking, to identity theft, to fraud, to all the bad things that can happen by bad people that want to get your data and your money. So that is my list. Again, I will put this on the show notes. So if you look for episode 75 of this podcast episode on the website, elevationfinancial.com, you'll see the checklist. But I hope the context and the background was helpful and useful as well. So with that, thanks as always. I appreciate you being a listener and following along. You can find me on the web at elevationfinancial.com. That is my website. And if you'd like to chat in more detail or more one-on-one, send me a note or book a complimentary money session using that big friendly button on the homepage. Again, that's elevationfinancial.com. I would love to answer your money questions. So as always, thanks again for joining us today. Have a great day. We'll see you next time. All right. Thanks so much. Green room portion here. I had a couple of viewers today, so I'll hang out for a little bit longer in case we have more questions. Leslie, thanks for popping in. Appreciate your stopping by and saying hello and your commentary there. So if anyone else is still there hanging out with any questions, pop them in now. I'll be looking for those over the next 3 or 4 seconds here. And otherwise, been a pleasure being with you today as we talked about cybersecurity and doing a personal cybersecurity audit. So if you like the show, I also would love it if you would tell some friends about it, whether they want to watch via Facebook Live, YouTube Live, or via the podcast. I would love it if you want to pass maybe this episode along or just the show in general. Tell a friend about it and invite them to subscribe or say hello. And I'd love to grow the audience a bit and help them as well. So thanks as always for joining me today. As a reminder, we do this every Tuesday afternoon, 1:30 p.m. Eastern, via Facebook Live and YouTube Live. So hit the subscribe button on the page for Elevation Financial or the YouTube channel, and you'll be notified every time we go live. All right. So again, the month of October is cybersecurity, credit reporting, and money systems. I've got some great topics planned for you this month. So hang out, and I'll see you next week. Thanks so much, everyone.